Mia in my basement, Oshun in my pipes, no trust fund in the 215.
Welcome to the Rosenbach Podcast. I'm Alex Ames, and this is Season 1, Books and Bitters, Adventures in Book Collecting, in which we explore the stories behind fascinating objects in the Rosenbach's collection, and engage in critical conversation about the place of rare books, libraries, and museums in modern-day life. In this episode, we're considering a critical moment in Dr. Rosenbach's long legacy of civic activism connected to his Jewish faith. His decision, during the rise of Nazism and violence based on religion, ethnicity, and race in Germany, to employ his skills in rare book salesmanship in hopes of helping refugees who were escaping Europe. In December 1938, the dark clouds of dictatorship hung over Europe as the world tipped on the brink of war. Just weeks before, on November 9 and 10, mobs in Germany and Austria had vandalized Jewish-owned businesses and houses of worship in events commonly known as Kristallnacht, or Night of the Broken Glass. The Nazi regime's policy of persecution against Jews and other ethnic, religious, political, and minority groups would of course intensify in the coming years, resulting in the horrors of the Holocaust. Hitler's final solution, as genocide of the Jews of Europe was known, remained in the future in 1938, though informed onlookers in the United States realized the danger faced by European Jews, as ethnic, religious, and political antipathy intensified, and a growing refugee crisis demanded attention. That's where Dr. A.S.W. Rosenbach, one of the founders of the Rosenbach, comes into the picture. By the 1930s, Dr. Rosenbach had already established a global reputation for buying and selling top-of-the-line rare books and manuscripts, and helping to build some of the greatest libraries in the United States. Having assembled a list of contacts that would have impressed just about anyone, and certainly any other bookseller, Dr. Rosenbach put his considerable social capital and network of associates to good use to raise money in support of refugees fleeing Europe. On December 8, 1938, Dr. Rosenbach hosted a rare book auction at the exclusive Hotel Plaza in New York City that raised $35,000 for 2 American committees working to assist refugees fleeing their homelands. The fundraiser was an interfaith effort, having been sponsored by the Joint Distribution Committee of the American Funds for Jewish War Sufferers and the Committee for Christian Refugees. Through his work with these organizations on this charitable endeavor, Dr. Rosenbach wielded his book company's reputation and resources for the cause's benefit. Key to the charity auction's success was its high-profile nature, due in no small part to Dr. Rosenbach's work to attract the interest and support of celebrities and cultural leaders for the cause. Trendsetters, including famous author Christopher Morley and radio star Major Edward Bowes, served as auctioneers. Members of the organizing committee included publisher Alfred A. Knopf and Colonel Theodore Roosevelt. Famous book collectors, artists, and intellectuals donated items to the sale. Letters now housed in the Rosenbach's archives reveal how enthusiastically cultural figures like Pulitzer Prize-winning author Edna Ferber and legendary composer Irving Berlin supported Dr. Rosenbach's efforts at assisting refugees, as well as the doctor's persuasive abilities at pulling these celebrities in to support the cause. Ferber, who was very famous in her own time, wrote to Dr. Rosenbach on October 28, 1938, in response to his invitation to join the auction planning committee. She said, quote, "Committees have had a kind of horror connotation for me ever since my newspaper reporting days years ago. I almost never serve on them, but it seems to me that if I can be of any use to you in the book auction you are planning for December 8th, I should be less than civilized if I were to refuse. In making a donation to the auction, Irving Berlin wrote to Dr. Rosenbach on November 8, quote, "I am only too glad to do this knowing how worthy the cause of raising funds for the German refugees is. My very best to you." These sorts of reactions speak both to Dr. Rosenbach's own stature in American literary and intellectual culture, and the seriousness of the cause for which he was raising funds and gathering auction items. We're very fortunate to have these letters in the Rosenbach's collection today, seeing as they document such an important moment in Dr. Rosenbach's civic work. The book auction itself was a glittery affair. Famous American journalist Dorothy Thompson, who had been expelled from Germany by the Nazis in 1934, opened the event at the Hotel Plaza on the evening of December 8. She told the crowd, quote, "It is poetic justice that this gathering of book lovers should come to the aid of the victims of those who are book burners." Thompson proceeded to lead the auction of a manuscript essay donated by the illustrious scholar Dr. Thomas Mann, who had been expelled from Germany by the Nazis. The essay, which analyzed Richard Wagner's opera Der Ring des Nibelungen, fetched $1,300. Then some of Thompson's own writings were auctioned off. The famous actor Eddie Cantor led the sale of an article Dorothy Thompson had written titled, quote, "To a Jewish Friend," which brought $1,100. A second article titled, quote, "'Tis of Thee," garnered $750. Other items, most with prominent celebrity and book collector connections, yielded impressive prices. Arturo Toscanini, for instance, wrote a musical manuscript specifically to be sold at the event, and it netted $1,200 for the charitable cause. Another wonderful artifact of this event in the Rosenbach's collection is the auction catalog itself. It really is a work of art. Famous designer and printmaker Rockwell Kent designed an image for the cover. Dr. Thomas Mann wrote a foreword to the catalog, and Professor Albert Einstein, who was himself a German Jew exiled from his homeland, wrote a preface that summarized the spirit of the affair. I'd like to read you the entire Einstein Preface. Quote, "This catalog bears witness to an undertaking of practical aid on behalf of peoples in Europe who are being unjustly persecuted. It is an act of joint cooperation on the part of Christian and Jewish philanthropists who serve and remain true to the cause of humanity. Such efforts mitigate grievous distress and, over and above all this, strengthen those social forces in their own land which alone can lead to real and lasting security. In our times, it becomes particularly clear that humanity and readiness to serve mean more to society than all wisdom and all technical progress. For the possession of power as a tool is less decisive than the directed idea in which it is used. May this endeavor be successful in its immediate material result, as well as in regard to the convictions that emanate from it." A New York Times article published after the sale noted that some items remained to be had following the auction. The Times reported on December 16, 1938, quote, "Many valuable items still remain since there was not time to offer them at the auction. These have been placed on exhibition and sale at the book rooms of Dr. A.S.W. Rosenbach, 15 East 51st Street. Among these are the original autographed manuscript of Robert Louis Stevenson's The Justice Clerk, dedicated to his wife, a collection of Thoreau's manuscripts with his original manuscript Merrimack Map, first Philadelphia edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, a first edition of Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, and modern first editions and manuscripts. This story is a fascinating part of Dr. Rosenbach's legacy in the book world because it showed his ingenuity in wielding his social and cultural capital at a time when moral clarity surrounding a refugee crisis was required. In a time of global upheaval and increasing calamity for Jews and many other people in Europe, Dr. Rosenbach used some of the best tools at his disposal, namely his organizational ability, his extensive society connections, and his stellar reputation in the book trade, to make a difference in the cause of humanitarian relief. His celebrity contacts recognized Dr. Rosenbach's achievement. Major Edward Bowes wrote to Dr. Rosenbach on December 9, 1938, quote, Congratulations on the magnificent affair last night. Such a showing is a tribute to the esteem in which you are universally held. The events of more than 80 years ago exemplify both Dr. Rosenbach's professional accomplishment as a book dealer and his commitment to pluralism, which had been nurtured over generations of his family life in Philadelphia and through his own extensive involvement in Jewish activist organizations. Journalist Dorothy Thompson's observation that, quote, book lovers should come to the aid of the victims of those who are book burners, embodies the spirit of an event that brought together the most illustrious figures in the American book world for an honorable cause. We're fortunate at the Rosenbach not only to possess a remarkable collection of rare books, manuscripts, and fine and decorative art that Dr. Rosenbach and Philip Rosenbach acquired from diverse sources all over the world, but also to hold an in-depth archive of the brothers' civic and business affairs, which allows us to uncover stories like these. Thank you for listening to the Rosenbach Podcast. Check back soon for another peek into the Rosenbach's remarkable collection of rare books, manuscripts, art, and artifacts, and for more fascinating conversations about history, literature, and culture. In the next episode, we'll continue exploring the ideas raised by the events described in this episode by having a conversation with Richard Ovenden, Bodley's librarian at the University of Oxford. As head of the university's library system and author of a landmark new historical study titled Burning the Books, A History of the Deliberate Destruction of Knowledge, Ovenden is uniquely qualified to offer insights on the place of rare books, manuscripts, and information in free and open societies. Mr. Ovenden will share his perspectives on Dorothy Thompson's salient observation that, quote, book lovers should come to the aid of the victims of those who are book burners, and share thoughts on the challenges and possibilities faced by democracies during the digital information revolution of our own time. I'll ask Mr. Ovenden what it's like to oversee the work of the Bodleian Library, one of the world's most historic and legendary libraries. To learn more about the Rosenbach, please visit rosenbach.org. We host a variety of on-site and online events and public programs, and always welcome questions from listeners about how to use our collections. The Rosenbach's community reaches all around the globe, brought together by our love for history, rare books, manuscripts, and the arts. I hope you will consider supporting the Rosenbach and this podcast by becoming a member today. It's one of the best ways to help us with projects like this. Memberships start at just $55 and give you access to everything we have to offer, online and in person. Thank you for your support. If you enjoy the introductory and concluding music featured on the podcast, which was composed and performed by Rosenbach Board of Directors member Yolanda Wisher and her band, the Afro Eaters, and was recorded at WRTI 90.1 in Philadelphia for NPR live sessions, visit WRTI.org to learn more. Also, please consider purchasing Yolanda Wisher's new album. Just visit rosenbach.org for information. The Rosenbach Podcast is supported by a grant from the Evelyn Toll Family Foundation. Thanks again, and I look forward to continuing our conversation on the next episode of the Rosenbach Podcast.
Give me eye in my basement, ocean in my pipes, no trust fund in the 215.